Chris, what is our first main topic today?
This one comes from Spidey 2099. As the Pam and Tommy miniseries starring Lily James and Sebastian Stan is set to premiere February 2nd, it seems that a growing number are criticizing and planning to boycott the show. Reports are saying that Pamela and Tommy had no involvement whatsoever, and sources are saying Pamela is, quote, finding the retelling of her trauma incredibly painful. As much as I was looking forward to seeing this, I'm having second thoughts and wondering if projects like this should move forward without reaching out to the subjects first. What are your thoughts?
All right, thanks a lot for saying that in, man. And I can't remember, what is the name of it again? The Pamela and Tommy Lee?
I think it's
Pam and Tommy.
Pam and Tommy.
It's just Pam and Tommy. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it had a shorter name and stuff like that. So look, I remember when I first heard that they were doing this, I didn't really care all that much. It's like, really? They're doing that? I mean, when they said Lily James was going to be in, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I mean, she looks nothing like Pamela Anderson, but that's fine. Doesn't have to. And then I heard Sebastian Stan is Tommy Lee. Okay, he looks nothing like Tommy Lee, but that's okay. And then the trailer came out. And I'm like, that's Lily James? I'm telling you what, the wizarding work that comes out of Hogwarts makeup school in Hollywood is phenomenal because she looked like Pamela Anderson. Good Canadian kid, by the way. Got to throw that in there, of course. Pamela Anderson, good Canadian kid. And then Sebastian Stan, while he didn't look a hell of a lot like Tommy Lee, man, did he move like him, like the mannerisms and all that kind of stuff. And then the way they set up, I remember watching that trailer going, this is not really what I thought it was going to be. And it, at least to me, having only seen the promos, it seemed to me that they were really painting Pamela Anderson and Tommy as the victims of a real wrong that was done against them. But more than that, it looks to me like the show is really a social commentary about the rest of us, the world. Because let's face it, there is no scandal of the Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee sex tape if it wasn't for millions of people ravagingly going for it and downloading. And listen, I'll tell you what, when I was a kid and I had access to watch it, I wasn't thinking about, this is really victimizing somebody by downloading this and watching. My brain just wasn't thinking that way. It was, oh my God, I get to see Pamela Anderson have sex. That's what my freaking less than developed head and mind was thinking at the time. And probably a lot of other people did too. But this show, it seems like it's going to force us to look at, this has real implications on people's lives. And what does it say about us as a culture and our ravage hunger to consume embarrassing stuff about the famous celebrities we know and watch, particularly if it's salacious, like a sex tape. And this was the sex tape that was the grandfather of them all. It was the One Ring, Rob. This sex tape was the One Ring from under the Mount of Mordor that came out and that spawned all the other
truly
sex tapes.
in the darkness bound us.
Yes, and in the darkness it
Many
bound us.
times after, actually.
And it came out and, the three to the Dwarven Lords and this whatever. It came out and suddenly now celebrity sex tapes was a thing. And I think partially because our culture said and our culture showed that we will devour this stuff. And so now you didn't just have people breaking in and stealing VHS tapes out of their homes. Now they're hacking into their phones. Remember that? There was a big thing. A lot of celebrities like selfie nudes started coming out because people were breaking into people's phones. And I have been excited for this show, if for no other reason than really what's the social commentary here? What is this show going to tell us about us as a culture and as a society as a whole? That being said, like the person who wrote in the email said, apparently two people that they didn't ask if they can make the show and didn't ask for their input on was Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee. They didn't ask them. And Pamela Anderson actually going so far as to saying it's actually kind of hurtful reliving this experience. This comes to us from the folks over at Entertainment Tonight who write the following. The upcoming Pam and Tommy Hulu series has been very painful for Pamela Anderson and for anyone that loves her, the source tells Entertainment Tonight. It is shocking that this series is allowed to happen without her approval. Anderson's marriage to Motley Crue drummer Tommy Lee is being dubbed as the greatest love story ever sold. That's a really clever hook. The series premieres with the first 3 episodes on Wednesday, February the 2nd, with new episodes streaming weekly on Hulu. later this month, showing another side of Anderson and Lee's sex tape scandal and the intense roller coaster ride the then couple went through following the leak of their infamous sex tape. So, and apparently it's gone a little bit even further than that, because now some Pamela Anderson fans are coming out and calling for a boycott of the show and all this kind of stuff. And they raise a really interesting question in the email they sent in. How should we feel about this? You know, knowing, because I don't think any of us knew that. I mean, I think we knew Pamela Anderson wasn't involved in the project, but not even consulted, not even talked to. This is a good Canadian kid. You gotta be a little bit more polite than that. So how should we feel about that? And I'm going to tell you what, and this is my initial thought, that very well could be different if you ask me again in 3 or 4 days. And I don't mean this to sound insensitive, particularly towards a fellow good Canadian kid, but it doesn't matter if she consented to this or not. This was a big thing that was a shift in our pop culture, in our society, and how we as people behave. And it ushered in a completely new kind of era of this digital voyeurism that we as a culture, this is a cultural event. And yes, Pamela and Tommy were at the heart of it. And I get that, and I understand that. And I think this show, at least I hope this show, is going to make us feel a lot of empathy for them and really portray them as the victims of a crime. But it is bigger than them, actually. They were at the heart of it, but it is bigger than them. And I would say this, while I don't dispute that maybe this show being made is raising painful memories for Pamela and probably Tommy Lee as well, I don't doubt that. But, and I'm not saying this is an apples to apples comparison, but it's a question that needs to be asked. When they make Lost and they have the show predicated on a plane crash, or let's make it more modern, Yellow Jackets, and they predicate a show on a plane crash, did they go out and talk to the families of people who have died? A lot of people have died in plane crashes. And are we asking them, does us making a big multimedia thing in the world that's kind of focused around a big event of a plane crash and people dying, are you okay with that as somebody who is a loved one, a family member of somebody who died in that? Or is this going to be painful for you? And again, I'm not purporting that that's an apples to apples comparison. But I remember in Canada, there was the worst serial killer in Canadian history. Bernardo and Homolka, which, I mean, this tells you something about the difference between the United States and Canada. They had like 3 or 4 victims, and that's the worst serial killer in the history of Canada. But this married couple, they would lure in young teenage girls, they would drug them, have sex with them, and murder them. And the guy got life in prison. His ex, Homolka, she got a sweeter deal because she testified against the husband, and now she's out. She's out of prison now. But they went ahead and made a movie about that. And I remember this came up at the time. And for Canadians, it's like, this is a horrible thing. Like, this is like a big stain on it. But an argument was made, and I thought there was a good argument made that, listen, this was not just what happened to them. This is a national event that happened. And we got to ask ourselves the question, are these the types of stories that really should be told? And I think if there is artistic merit, and if there's social commentary, and if there's an examination of who we are as a people in the story, which I believe this Pamela and Tommy Lee thing has to offer, then, and I may feel differently about this 72 hours from now. I may have a totally different answer 72 hours from now. But for now, I kind of feel like it's bigger than Pamela and Tommy Lee, even though it's called Pamela and Tommy Lee. So I don't know, Rob, I think this is a very interesting question that our viewer writes in. And again, I'm just at the beginning stages of kind of wrestling through this and how I feel about it, but that's kind of my initial reaction. You hear this, what's your initial thought?
Well, it really comes under, legalities as well. For instance, Adam McKay made Vice about Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was the vice president of the United States. So he's a public figure. His actions were documented. And once you do that, what are the legalities there? Who owns your story? The Social Network was based on a novel by Ben Mesrick called The Accidental Billionaires. That was about Mark Zuckerberg and the creation of Roberto Saverin, who Andrew Garfield played. And and the Winklevoss twins. All those are real people, but this was a happenstance. This was a thing that occurred. It's a matter of public record. It was documented in someone else's book. So
now, are you saying that like Zuckerberg wasn't consulted before
they
the
weren't
social network? So none of those people were consulted either.
No, yeah,
Okay.
they weren't consulted. They're real people, just like Pamela and Tommy Lee are real people. But this incident is a historical event, and so you can't copyright a historical event. And even if you're involved in a historical event, what are the legalities of controlling your own likeness in the instance that occurs? And as from what I understand, you sort of lose your rights. But again, I'm no lawyer. Somebody else would have to talk about this. But it happened. This is an event that happened. The moon landing happened. You can't say it didn't happen. And if you want to dramatize,
Well, there are some who say it didn't happen, but
yeah, the big enough telescope, you can actually see where they landed. But so it's a very interesting legal area. But I'm wondering if this is actually based on a book. Because otherwise, if it's a story that wasn't, and this is the origination of that story, I don't know how that all works. But, if it happened, if it's a real historical event, there's legalities that protect its fair use. You can tell this story under fair use. But again, I don't know. You'd have to consult things and look into it or whatever. But unfortunately, they don't have control over something that actually happened.
Chris, I mean, I think this is a really interesting topic because maybe the show becomes like the tape itself, something everybody wants to see, but maybe we shouldn't see. I mean, I don't know, but you hear this and the question gets posed, like, should we feel funny about watching this show, knowing that it's kind of made about these people, but these people weren't really involved? I don't know. How are you feeling about it?
I do feel funny about it now. And I have a friend who's hopefully making it into the show. They got cast on it and filmed their stuff. But now knowing that she wasn't consulted at all, it does feel a little gross because it just does feel reminiscent of that tape's release, right? She didn't consent in that being shown to everyone either. So that does kind of just have this echo effect of what actually happened before. And it really dehumanized her. And I think is what has led our culture to dehumanize figures as well on television or on YouTube. People don't view entertainers as people.
Yeah.
They view them, and when you talk to people about this too, I can't tell you how many times just on YouTube alone, I've had people say, "Oh, I didn't even realize you were a real person. How did you not realize I was a real person?" And that's just from talking about movies. Can you imagine the scrutiny you're under if people have objectified you in that manner? I am hoping that it is the great kind of social commentary that you're talking about, John, and it looks like it's going to be that from the promos. But other shows, like Impeachment, American Crime Story, they had Monica Lewinsky consulted every step of the way. I feel like there should have at least just been some kind of communication here. And obviously we're getting parts of a story, but as of right now, I feel a little torn on whether or not I should watch it.
But it's like King Richard came out, the recent movie about the Serena and
and Venus.
the Williams sisters. Yeah, Serena and they
starring Aaron Cummings, by the way.
Starring Aaron Cummings, but they did not agree to allow their names to be used as producers on the movie until they had signed off on it.
Right.
And they loved the movie. They loved the portrayal of their father, so they said, okay. So it was interesting. It was conditional, but they still, were involved. And when you're a public figure and you've done so many interviews and you're out there, like if you've given an interview to a publication, you don't own that interview anymore. The publication would, I guess, own that interview. If somebody does an Esquire article, the person who wrote that article, they would own the copyright, even though they might be interviewing the Williams sisters' dad, right. King Richard himself, whatever. So it's a very weird thing that we have in our culture, and I think the real question is what is the moral value? Like you pointed out, is telling the story a bigger issue? Are we learning something from this? And I think probably yes. I mean, we now live in a world where because of these sex tapes, celebrities were intentionally releasing sex tapes and they were intentionally using things. Now we have a whole universe of people that are putting their own private, intimate lives online, whether it's on OnlyFans or porn sites or whatever.
I haven't made as much from that as I thought I would.
Me
I'm just
neither.
going to throw that out.
I know.
Not the windfall I thought I was going to get.
But I mean, this was the beginning of all of that. It was a beginning of a great shift
Yeah.
And do you own James Dean being digitally recreated to appear in movies?
Yep.
I mean, what is the moral and ethical implications of what we are as people? Where is our identity? Where does it begin and where does it end? And I think this is something that we in our society have not figured out yet. And it's probably a good thing that the conversation continues.
You bring up a really interesting point when you brought up, like, I think Cheney's a great example of this, because it also asks a question about us, the audience. Because nobody cared, because people don't like Dick Cheney.
Right.
So nobody cared that he wasn't consulted. Nobody cared that
Cheney's not a victim.
Cheney's right. So Cheney's not a victim. Or when, or the various individuals, like the one with Steve Carell, The Big Short.
Yeah, which is
With The Big Short, the people whose lives were portrayed in that movie, not consulted.
again,
most
like
of them
Michael Burry, that was based on a book.
right.
So
And so, but a lot of people don't really care. But we like Pamela Anderson. And so now we care because of somebody we like. And that's an interesting thing that I catch myself as an audience member. It's like, wait a minute, is that something that I really think, or am I only thinking differently about it now because of somebody I like versus somebody I didn't like before?
That's a fair point.
And I think
Yep.
that's something that we got to catch ourselves into. Anyway, I think this is a fascinating topic. It will be interesting to see how viewed this thing is. And I'm going to be very interested to see how this show portrays Tommy Lee and Pat. Because I'll tell you what, I'm going to start to feel pretty gross about it if they start to portray this like it's their own damn fault.
exactly.
She's parading around on, what's the damn beach movie called, beach show?
Baywatch.
Yeah.
She's parading around in Baywatch and the tight little things that she got it. Like, if they start portraying her as that, then it's going to be like, screw you guys.
Exactly.
If they really do portray it as well as social commentary, portraying them as the victims of this, I don't know, it's going to be really interesting to see how we feel about it, depending on how the show portrays
well, I
them
think
all.
you can see from the trailers. I mean, I have to say this was made by the guy that made I, Tonya,
Yeah.
I believe,
And
which
he
was
did such a good job on
and
that.
again, that was another case of something that really happened, and there were books about it, and it was detailed in many different periodicals, and they were able to make that movie. Now I know that I think that Tanya Harding, she had some kind of input, like she might have talked to Margot Robbie or something, and she weighed in on the film, but I don't think there's any way that she could have stopped it.
All right, guys, the question is for you. What do you think about all this? Like, were you interested in the show at all? Maybe you weren't at all. Were you interested? And now maybe this type of a topic makes you go, oh, should I watch this or not? I mean, how are you feeling about it? Whatever you guys are thinking right now, jump into the comments section below and let us know your thoughts.